Hello. So I wanted to talk about A Hunger Artist, which is a short story by Franz Kafka. It is very short, but it's full of very interesting points and themes. So I'm going to go over like a quick recap of the story, and then I'm going to speak about different points that kind of grabbed my attention and stayed with me from it. So starting with the recap, so basically there is this hunger artist who stays fasting for up to 40 days. He has a manager and they go from one city to another to perform his show, which basically spans 40 days in each city, and he's sitting in a cage without any food, without access to food. He can only drink water to basically survive. And from each city, there are some guards who volunteer, since no one can actually just sit there for 40 days straight and make sure that the hunger artist is not, in fact, sneaking in any food. These guards take shifts to basically take on this task and make sure that he's not eating anything behind people's backs. Now, something worth noting here is that some of the guards kind of took pity to him, or maybe they didn't take the whole thing very seriously, and they would take some time away from the cage, like they'd stand a little bit far away in the dark to give him a chance to sneak in some food that they assumed he was probably hiding somewhere in the cage. And no one cares, whatever. And that greatly offended the hunger artist because they were not taking his dedication to his craft and his art seriously. And they just didn't understand the gravity of what he was doing. So, what he would do is, remember, he's starving, he's very weak. He would summon any energy that he has and sing as loudly as he can so that the guards can hear him for the entire time that they're standing away from the cage, just to prove a point that he actually is not sneaking in any food. He can't physically be eating and singing at the same time, until they come back and he would stop singing. Now, this is a very interesting point to me because this is someone who his whole art, his whole show needs to be witnessed. He can't just come up to people and claim that he's not eating for 40 days. Someone needs to witness that to make sure, to validate that this actually happened. And them just standing away, not taking it seriously, was offending to him and somehow nullified the whole achievement. It can't be an achievement if no one can ever be sure or witness that this actually happened. So, yeah, he actually also, to add to this point, he was so dedicated to this show that he wanted to extend the period of his fasting to be more than 40 days. He insisted on that multiple times, but his manager always refused and set 40 days as kind of a safety limit for, his survival. So basically, they would do this show, and once the period of the fasting is over, there would be this whole, celebration or whatever, and people would come and watch. A lot of people would gather. A lot of people would gather around his cage during like the entirety of his show, but especially on the day that the fast ends and it's time to finally eat. A lot of people would gather, and two beautiful women from the city would volunteer to escort him to his feast. And yet, when these two women would come to his cage and try to take his hand to walk him to the table that's full of delicious foods, he actually resists them. He uses any ounce of energy that he still has left. He's very weak at this point, and yet he actually resists them so much that they can't drag him to the feast, and the manager has to come and carry him to sit at the table and practically force feed him. And this just kept happening at every city. They would move from one city to another. However, eventually people started losing interest in the whole idea of a hunger act, and less people would gather around the cage, less and less people would actually show up. So eventually he lost his manager, no one cared, and the hunger artist had a problem at this point. What is he if he's not a hunger artist? What if he is what is he if no one is coming to witness his art that he's dedicated his whole life to? That's his identity. What now? So he resolves to basically like ask to be hired at a circus, like as a show part of the circus, and he accepts a very ridiculously low pay just so that he has the ability to do what he knows how to do, the only thing that he knows how to do, his art. And so the circus reluctantly, accepts him, and they give him a cage next to the wild animals, basically like the lions and whatever that they use in the circus. And he just sits in that cage. No one really maintains the cage. No one updates his chart where there's like the number of days he's been fasting, and it's not even like a main part of the show. People basically just pass by him on their way to see the animals or on their way to see like other shows. Occasionally someone would, pause and look, see what's going on, but with time, people kind of forgot about him, to the point that the cage, like to passerbys, seemed empty. Until at some point, someone noticed it, someone noticed the cage, someone found that there's actually a person in there. At this point, God knows how long he's been fasting for, and he's basically dying. And at this point, he says something, basically his last words, that kind of reveals a lot about his art and his show and his eternal dissatisfaction with the quality of what he's doing. Basically, he says that the only reason he's doing this is because he's never found food that he likes to eat. And had he in fact found something that he enjoyed eating, he would not stop eating it. Which is kind of changes your perspective on everything so far. He says that and he dies. Okay, so that's the story. Oh yeah, and after he dies, his cage, they put a panther in instead of like in his place, and the panther is very lively, very hungry, very strong, vital life energy takes place in the cage where the hunger artist once was. Now, okay, I love this story and I think it touches on so many interesting things. So starting with the identity crisis, the obvious thing. The hunger artist, if he's not a hunger artist, he's nothing. There's nothing else he can do. He doesn't think of himself really beyond his act, and this is kind of a theme that's maybe a little bit common in Kafka's stories. He takes like one idea or one characteristic in an identity and really exaggerates it so that anything else is not really very relevant. It's just like a person is reduced to that one specific thing. At least that's how they think of themselves. And then when he doesn't have an opportunity to do this, or when people don't take it seriously, he doesn't feel like a person anymore. That's everything he can do. And that kind of sparks a question in my mind of, like, if you dedicate yourself so much to a craft, regardless of the fact that, he wasn't actually suffering or struggling or anything, he actually just didn't want to eat. But let's just put a pin in that for a second. If you dedicate yourself so much, so entirely to something, would it still feel the same even if no one was benefiting from it, no one was interested in it, no one was verifying it, its validity, its integrity? Remember, no one really could know for sure, like not one individual person could sit for 40 days and validate the fact that he's not actually eaten anything. So no one could truly witness his achievement. No one could be 100% sure of it. So the hunger artist really longed to be seen for what he is, because that's who he is. That's his entire thing. That's his entire personality in his point of view. That's what he can do. And no one truly witnesses him. So he has this eternal loneliness. And even when people lose interest completely, like, you gotta ask yourself at some point, what are you doing this for? you're not getting like internal satisfaction from it, because it was said repeatedly that he cannot still feel satisfied with with his act, no matter what, no matter how long it takes, no matter how much he tries to prove to people that he's not actually eating anything. He was not getting like the validation that he wants from like external validation or admiration from viewers anymore. So you gotta ask yourself, like, what is the value of this exactly? Also, another thing to note here, or to ask basically, is can we still like look at his art and consider it art, and consider it an accomplishment or an achievement, and admire it the same way once we know the fact that he's only doing this because he doesn't actually like to eat anything at all? He hates food, and had he found food that he liked, he would not have stopped eating, by his own words. That changes how we look at the whole thing. It's no longer as impressive, it's no longer as admirable. We know it's not coming from a spiritual transcendence or from self-discipline. It's simply that he does not want to eat. It's simply a matter of desire, whether or not he desires food or not. It's still the fact that he managed to do the thing, right? The outcome is the same. Like, there are two different people who could starve themselves for 40 days, but then which one is more impressive? The one who had the desire to eat and kind of restrained themselves from it, or the one who never has the desire to eat? Again, this is something to think about, and to think about when we're evaluating different acts in life and different responses and different kinds of art. It surfaces the idea that you can't just look at the outcome. You can't just look at the outcome. You can't just look at a count of days. You can't just look at the act in isolation. You have to look at what drove the person to do this thing. You have to look at the story behind the act, the intentions, the feelings, the desires underneath, etc. Otherwise, it's empty. And you can't truly witness it, you can't truly understand it, or evaluate it, or feel anything behind it. And I think that's a very interesting thing, because I've always loved to look at the story behind how different paintings, for example, were created, and like the methods used. And sometimes a very visually simple painting you would find it extremely impressive once you've known how it was created and the story behind it. It gives it so much more depth. And it's just like an artistic point on like the side. But I think it's a very key idea here, and because the whole theme is around the integrity of the show, the integrity of the art, and the appreciation or lack thereof of the artist, and whether or not he actually deserves it, that appreciation or admiration, based on what drives him to do or to practice his art. Alright, so I think one more point that I wanted to cover is basically the panther thing, which is like, it's a very absurd point, but it was just interesting, that stark contrast in the end when you see like the lifeless cage where the hunger artist is, where no one really sees him, people pass him by, nobody really notices him anymore, no one cares, and yet he dedicates his life to this show. He either dedicates it to his show because he's committed and he wants the integrity of it, or, as we know in the end, simply because that's how he can be. There's, like, to him, there's no other way of being. And that consumes him until he dies. And in his place, we see this very lively, very vital, very hungry being. And now people are gathered, they want to see that panther, they want to see him with all of his might and strength and hunger. And I think it's just a very stark image and contrast that adds everything and puts everything in perspective in the end. Um, yeah, I think it's a very cool story, and it's amazing to me how someone could put so much depth and different ideas and pose such existential questions about art and identity and being and intentions, etc., in like a very short story. Like it's just a couple of pages long, not a couple of pages, but like a few pages. But that's Kafka, and it was a very interesting read. I recommend it, even though I just told you everything like that happened. But I think the experience of actually reading it, obviously, there's so much depth there that you wouldn't get from just hearing about the story. So I definitely recommend it. And yeah, that's it. Let me know what you think about all of this. And I've posed a few questions that basically are, in my view, are unanswerable, or maybe like the answer will differ depending on your view. So I'm interested to hear if you like what you think about this as well. And that's all for today. Bye bye.